Welcome again, I'm Dave Ziegler. This is the second part of our trauma series, and we'll be talking about what we can do to help an individual respond to and to bounce back from traumatic experiences and try to prevent some of the negative things that oftentimes happen to people in the long run after they have had very serious and life-threatening or traumatizing experiences. We will want to mitigate some of the negative impacts, and here's the most important reason why we want to do that. Because when something traumatic happens to an individual and they're very young, they will essentially lose their childhood. The job of a child is to play and to learn, and when a child is damaged and their brain picks up that there is a threat to survival, all of a sudden the brain begins to focus almost primarily on survival and not playing and not learning. And so they lose their childhood, they become very, very serious little kids. And we can often spot when that happens, and that's one of the ways that we can see maybe something's not right in this child's life. Well, that can become a pervasive problem because they begin to have relationship problems with others. They begin to have trouble with peers in school. They begin to have trouble with relationships with family members. Sometimes these kids are removed from their homes because of trauma, and they go into foster and adoptive homes, and they have trouble getting along with people in their families. So difficulty in social experiences both at home and then at school. Later on, it's the importance of the peer group for kids and teens, and they have trouble making and keeping relationships. Then there are issues in early adulthood where they're supposed to connect with others in terms of close relationships, and they have trouble with that. Into adulthood where they have less social support, and now we know that the development of toxic or chronic stress in the long run will likely 20 to 30 years down the road begin to develop medical diseases. And so these individuals, not only they lose their childhood, have an isolated, sad life, but then they can actually live a shorter life and die of some preventable medical disease if they could have done something about the toxic stress along the way. So how do we address this and try to prevent that whole negative scenario from happening? And one of the ways that we can do that is to follow some of these guidelines. The first thing we want to do is provide support and a supportive, safe situation for the individual, no matter what the age is. And by the way, the younger that we can get to these kids and help them, the better the outcome is going to be in the long run. We need to build a sense of safety. We need to build a sense of control for the child. These children become very, very focused on control and power because they need to protect themselves. And so if we can give children appropriate levels of control that they have over their life, that can be helpful. We want to encourage them to communicate. Research has shown that when people talk about damage they've been through, their brain will heal. And that's a very useful way to, even Freud came up with the talking therapy 150 years ago, and that was when we share the kind of stress and pain that we feel, then we actually improve because of that. Emotional expression is very good, a wide range from anger to happiness to sadness to frustration. An expressive environment is very healing for the individual that has been traumatized. We want to put the trauma in perspective, and because the individual believes that trauma is continuing to happen, and they need to know, like a soldier, that there is a war zone that they have left and now it is safe. That is more problematic for kids, but it is something that we can help them put into context. And I have always felt like it's a good idea to externalize the situation that you're trying to present for the child. If they want to feel safe, then provide them with signals that they are safe in their room, in the classroom, in your office as a therapist, wherever the situation is that you are. So treatment is what happens, and what we want to talk about is trauma treatment. Treatment is what happens in all sorts of environments for the child. It's not just in the psychologist's office. It's in the supportive classroom. It's in the caring and nurturing foster home. And actually, children heal better in families than they do in other settings. I will say this, and there is some pretty good support for this among some of the experts in the field of trauma, is that younger kids should receive some level of professional help and consultation. And older individuals that have been traumatized in their life, only if that trauma is seriously impacting their daily life do they necessarily need professional help, but most children should be given some kind of help after a traumatic experience. So I want to go over quickly the 10 steps of treating and responding to trauma that will help the individual move on without carrying that trauma throughout life with them. We have to start with safety. We have to start with trust, to begin to build trust and exploration in a safe situation. Again, that can happen in many, many contexts. We need to understand the trauma from the perspective of the individual. All trauma is not the same. All situations don't produce the same kind of impact on an individual. All trauma is individualized. It's how the brain perceives the situation, and we react based upon the way we perceive it. So we need to understand how the individual is responding to the events, and not just from the events itself. We need to explore the trauma memories. We need to take a look at how that event has shown itself in some of the emotional and behavioral reactions and some of the perceptions of the individual. So we need to be good detectives and take a look at what's going to help the child. We need to learn to, in terms of deconditioning, we want to teach kids relaxation, the ability to turn off their stress and decondition what I called a few minutes ago, toxic stress that will have a serious impact later on their physical health. We need to re-expose the individual to themes that remind them of the situation, but this time we need to help the child or the teen bring along their new tools to be able to relax in the context that they would normally overreact to stressors that have happened in the past. I know I'm going quickly, but these are some of the issues that we want to build into these situations, and you can get much more information about this after we're done with this DVD in a variety of very, very good books. We then need to begin to restructure the meaning of what's happened. It's often good to give children the sense that they have some control over an event that's occurred in their past by feeling like they can write the last chapter of the situation. Well, they did not become overcome by the trauma. They prevailed, they lived through it, and they can be stronger based upon that. We need to work with problematic behaviors and put some positive coping behaviors in the place of some of those problem reactions. And we need to work to develop a new internal sense of self that doesn't eliminate the trauma in what they've been through, but incorporates it into their self-image and who they are. We need to teach kids specific coping skills. The ability to cope and to be able to handle things in life, particularly very serious stress, is something that all human beings need to learn through experience and learn through teaching. So teach coping skills. And then the last thing is self-mastery. It's practice, practice, practice. It is the brain that responds negatively to abuse, and it's the brain that needs practice in terms of responding in positive and coping ways to abuse. So this has just been a very brief overview of general categories, and there'll be specific things that hopefully that you can see that you can do under each one of these things to build in safety, to allow expression. Many adults have kids stop crying or stop emoting, stop expressing frustration, but actually what will help them is to be able to express those things because they get a little better each time, and their brain begins to self-heal when it can express to an environment that cares and will listen as to what's going on inside. And so trauma will affect the personality. Are there ways that we could talk about that we won't here? It affects the brain and long-term impacts of the brain, and this can be very significant. It can influence attachment and bonding, and I'll refer to our other DVD on attachment and how trauma and attachment go together. There is much more that can be said about all the 10 ways of treating abuse, treating trauma that I went through very quickly, and how resiliency can turn bad things into very good things. That's a whole nother topic that would be very good to look into for anybody watching this tape. So I hope that all of you feel a real sense, as I do, of urgency to help young kids heal from trauma so that they don't lose as much as their childhood, they don't develop isolated lives and become unhappy teens and isolated, unhappy adults that often will look for ways to address that unhappiness with substances, with alcohol, with drugs, other addictions. I hope you feel an urgency to, in any way that you can, reach out to somebody that's been traumatized and see if you can help them, provide them with social support, provide them with an understanding ear to allow them to express what's going on with them and what's happened to them. And it is through safety and support that we heal from traumatic events. So again, this has been a very quick treatment, but these are the primary building blocks of being able to help individuals so that they can have a chance at a connected and a positive life down the road, not just childhood, not just teen and young adult years, but in later years, and not have the toxic stress that will produce many of the medical diseases that are a problem. So thank you for joining me today, and I hope that you will reach out to somebody that you know of that's been hurt and offer your help and your support. Thank you.